I finally did it. I finally completed No Kuni 2. For those who don't know, No Kuni is a JRPG made in part by Studio Ghibli, and as with most JRPGs, it's very long. Like 115 hours long. I mean, a lot of the time came from one specific thing, and if you've played the game before, you know what I'm talking about, but I'll get to that later. As you can imagine, if the game is that long, it must have a lot of stuff. And for the most part, it doesn't resort to bloat for its content. Maybe that's why it was so fulfilling to come back and complete this game. Again, but harder, and not give up on the post-game this time. So, before I get to the rest of this video, I'll just give the obligatory spoiler warning. I won't necessarily be spoiling the plot, but I will be mentioning some things as a result of significant plot points, and maybe some of the things I bring up might dissuade you from playing the game yourself, but trust me, it's worth it, so go play the game yourself and come back. Okay, you good? Then let's get into it. So, the main progression system of the game is Evan's Kingdom, Evermore. Evermore is where you can generate materials, craft and enhance equipment, upgrade spells and abilities, and buy various combat items. Evermore will mostly be completed passively as you progress the main story, but it is technically optional, so make sure you come back to check on it once in a while. Evermore is the main thing that all other side progress will come back to, so completing Evermore will involve significant progress pretty much everywhere else. For example, you might complete a side quest that gives you some rare materials that you can use to craft new weapons or armor. Maybe after completing a quest, you get King's Guilders that you can use to upgrade the various buildings in Evermore to generate more materials. Or, the most enticing reward, you could get a new citizen to help with research that enhances combat or upgrades various parts of the open world. So, as you can see, despite Evermore being the largest investment, it's the most rewarding endeavor, and why most people will have already completed it by the end of the game. So, what exactly is required? Well, there's 65 buildings to make. Each building has 4 levels of upgrades, there's 100 citizens to find and place in the buildings, and 160 research topics to complete. So a lot to do, but most of it will be done in the background, and you'll be done before you know it. The next most important part of this game, or any JRPG for that matter, is the side quest system. In this game, side quests will obviously give XP and money, but they can additionally give anything from rare materials, rare equipment, collectibles, or kingdom rewards like King's Guilders and citizens. Most of the side quests boil down to one of a few different requirements, either craft or collect a specific rare or unique item, talk to a series of NPCs, complete an optional dungeon, or kill a unique enemy. Alongside side quests, there is also Swift Solutions, which are procedurally generated, simpler variations of normal side quests, such as collect some common items, craft common equipment, or kill common enemies. And these quests are designed to be quick and easy, as the name suggests, because they give special tokens of gratitude that can be redeemed for rare items to help other side quests, or for minor citizens to fill out the kingdom. Hey, it's almost as if these parts of the game are well designed and reward the player for cleverly interacting with the game's systems. How about that? Anyway, back to side quests. I like to single out a couple of these side quests that are a little annoying, such as collect an item from the post-game, guess a random string of words, kill a mini-boss 20 levels higher than you in an area you can't reach yet, and everybody's favourite, collect an item that becomes rarer to find the longer you've been playing the game and becomes near impossible to find outside of easy difficulty. Either way, these are only 4 of the 195 side quests in the game. You might be seeing why this game takes so long. Moving on, this game has a lot of miscellaneous open-world objectives that mostly serve as side quest objectives, but they all have a reason to be sought out. First is Higgledy Stones, glowing rocks placed in hard-to-reach parts of dungeons that will give the player a special Higgledy when offered a specific item. For those who don't know, Higgledies are, for lack of a simpler term, little guys who act as pseudo-party members that help the player with various combat buffs and abilities. And for the most part, Higgledies are crafted at Evermore, but there are still 30 Higgledy Stones to find throughout the world. The next part of the open world is Skirmishes, a borderline minigame where Evan commands his army to drive away enemy forces from a specific area. I'm lumping this in with the open world because it's used a whopping 3 whole times in the main story, and is mostly relegated to side quest objectives, or optional missions to level up your party because a side quest is too hard, or, like me, you weren't expecting a required skirmish immediately before the final boss after having not touched skirmishes for over 50 hours. Either way, there are 50 skirmishes to complete, and they don't take that long, especially when you have 9 trillion Kings Guilders and can use every buff nonchalantly. Next up is my favourite part of the open world, Tainted Monsters. Special mini-bosses that serve as a test of your strength that reward you with unique or rare equipment. I tended to use these more as an inefficient grinding method whenever I was too underleveled for the story, but to each their own. There's not too much to say about these guys, other than there are 50 of them to kill for the achievement, and an additional 10 after the first set is done. Altogether, across the open world, there are 150 higgledies to find or craft, 50 skirmishes to complete, and 60 tainted monsters to kill. The final significant part of the base game is the Dreamer's Mazes. These are a set of 10 different procedurally generated dungeons that serve as the optimal grinding method for items from a particular section of the map. And at the end of these dungeons, there's a unique mini-boss that grants a rarer item based on the difficulty level of the maze. 9 of these mazes can be somewhat ignored as their intended upside is obsoleted by Evermore, but after completing their first time completion rewards, you can access the Faraway Forest Maze, the longest, hardest maze with the rarest and best materials. The free DLC adds on to this, but it's more or less the same. As you can probably guess, the Faraway Forest is where most of your post-game grinding will happen, so that you can craft the best equipment and complete the last side quests. So at this point, I've explained pretty much every objective of the base game, and at this point I was about 70-ish hours into the game and had every original achievement. But if you didn't know, this game has 3 DLCs, and that's where the next 45 hours came from. These DLCs could make a video in their own right, but that would inevitably devolve into a 30-minute rant about how much of a waste of time some of this is, so for the sake of my own sanity and the flow of the video, I'll simplify. So let's get into it. The first DLC to mention is the Adventure Pack, or as I'll be calling it, the Winnower DLC. The Winnower DLC can kind of be considered the unofficial post-game, because although it unlocks after finishing Goldpaw, most of it is done after the final boss. The main thing to note here is the additional 10 floors of the Faraway Forest, and the 8 more side quests involved along the way. This one's pretty small, but what did you expect from a free DLC? Onto the first significant DLC, the Lair of the Lost Lord, aka the Labyrinth. The Labyrinth is a significant departure from the main game, and kind of obsoletes a lot of the base game grinding, as the Labyrinth gives all the materials from the Faraway Forest, and much better gear than the base game. Like, it's not even close. Anyway, what does this DLC entail? Well, you remember how the Dreamer's Mazes work? The Labyrinth is a 100-floor, procedurally generated dungeon. Need I say more? No, the actual thing to mention here, at least in the context of this video, is the 2 Marshall methods. A new system that replaces aspects of your combat toolkit to enhance aspects of your preferred playstyle. For example, you might have noticed in the background footage that I have Witch Time! That's the first Marshall method, Ding Dong Discipline. As you can see, this style sacrifices defense in exchange for a perfect dodge that slows down time and lets you deal massive damage very quickly. As a side note, some people might say that this doesn't benefit Roland very well and I should have played someone like Tanny, but I like to play Roland, and if that makes the game harder then so be it. Anyway, the next martial method in this DLC is Gizmo Supremo, and this one is incredibly powerful, but not numbers-wise. This style gives you a second skill wheel with gadgets for things like crowd control, healing, area denial, and weakness abuse. And these perks are useful sometimes, but the main thing is the passives that let you hold more items and make them stronger. This is hands down the best part of any martial method, and anyone who's played the game before will know why. Combat items are already a valuable resource, so anything that can upgrade or circumvent them is insanely useful. Anyway, I just had this one on Bracken to switch to when I needed to use items, and it helped immensely. Getting back on track here, each Marshall method has 15 manuals to find, which will give you more points to spend on upgrading the style. And the manuals are found as you complete the labyrinth, either from significant flaws, or from the shop at the entrance. And if you're missing some, then check Ding Dong Dell and Broadleaf for map markers. And now for the most infamous part of this game, the second DLC, Tale of a Timeless Tome. This DLC is much closer to the conceit of the game, being a more in-depth storyline focusing on subtle world building and character development. This DLC revolves around the 6 memory lanes, new dungeons loosely themed around the backstory of a different side character. And yes, I'm including the dungeons before the New Moon rooms as a memory lane. It's Oliver's. It's not that hard to figure out. This DLC also includes 2 new Marshall methods, as well as a new type of even more powerful equipment, and the doorway to hell. The 2 new Marshall methods are okay, but I didn't use either of them very much because they weren't much fun. The first one is the Wizard's Companion, which replaces spells with a minigame where you have to press the right buttons quickly to buff the spell in various ways. And when used the intended way, this is a nice side grade to normal magic. But when abused, this is undoubtedly the meta. I was frequently getting around 120,000 damage per second without even really trying. For context, Classic Style tops out at about 40,000 DPS, and Ding Dong Discipline at about 80,000. And those methods take good equipment and skill to reach that DPS. I didn't really like using Wizard's Companion despite its overwhelming power, but I still had it on Leander as somewhat of a get-out-of-jail-free card. The second Marshall method is Martha's Method, a method built around Higgledies. The main change is that you can absorb Higgledies into a giant bomb that replaces your ranged attacks. And much like Gizmo Supremo, this method's utility is mostly from passives. But the passives are all vastly overshadowed by Gizmo Supremo, meaning this method is kind of terrible. Unless you're Bracken and have an insane range damage stat and spam the shit out of the bomb to abuse ranged weaknesses. Overall, I didn't use these methods unless a specific boss annoyed me a lot and happened to be weak to either magic or range damage. The next thing of note in this DLC is the legendary equipment. I know they're called Nazcan, however you pronounce that, it's too much of a mouthful to say. But anyway, these items are how the DLC buffs up your equipment past the base game. And I know the Labyrinth did something similar, but those were just endgame weapons with inflated stats. Legendary weapons are different. For one, they're craftable, and for two, they have specific bonuses on them that actually synergize with each other, like Dark Imbuement and increased dark damage, increased MP and magic damage, or, my favorite one, 240 more attack stat. I don't have much else to say about these items, just that this is the other progression along with the Marshall methods. Okay, so far, you might be wondering why this DLC is so infamous, and everything I've mentioned so far I actually really enjoyed. So far, because now we get to the part that I've been dreading, the Solium Slog. A set of 30 levels with 3 different waves of enemies of increasing difficulty and rewards. And you might be hearing that and thinking, okay, a little grindy to complete, but that sounds like a fun way to test your combat skills. And I'd agree if it wasn't for this. A fucking timer. And if you don't get S rank, you don't get any decent rewards at all. And that's not even the worst part. Remember those legendary items? Yeah, this is how you get them. If you don't want to grind for world drops, the crafting recipes are unlocked from S ranking specific levels, and the materials are only dropped in the slog. Every item is crafted with bronze, silver, or gold ingots of either regular, refined, or pure quality, dropped based on how deep into the slog you are. And not even frequently. I couldn't find any numbers on this, but I'd guess that it's about a 10% chance per ingot from any given mission, and even when you're 70 levels higher than the enemies you're fighting, it still takes 5 minutes per attempt, meaning that it can easily take 50 minutes for 1 ingot. And that's assuming you get an S rank each time, which might be fine on the earlier missions, but once you get to around mission 20, I was only getting S ranks about a third of the time because the levels were taking over 10 minutes to complete, meaning that getting pure silver ingots and higher could take multiple hours per ingot. So extrapolating this across multiple ingots per item, 7 items per party member, and 3 party members to equip, it can easily take over 100 hours to fully equip your team to even remotely have a chance at some of the last missions. And this is where my confession comes in. I didn't actually complete the slog, meaning that this video is technically a lie. But can you blame me? I already spent at least 20 hours grinding the slog to get as far as I did, and it broke me. And this is before some of the absolute horse shit in some of the last levels. Like, in Mission 28, you have an extremely tanky boss that can randomly summon more bosses an endless number of times. And remember the whole time limit thing? I am convinced that this is the worst part of not only this game, but every JRPG I have ever played. Okay, I need to wrap this video up now because I can't keep complaining about the slog. But, thankfully, that was the last part of the game. And honestly, even though I've complained this much, I still really enjoyed completing this game. Even some of the more obtuse achievements and side quests weren't that bad. At least retroactively after the slog. So, one last time, let's review all the things needed to complete this game. DLC and all. There's 9 main story chapters, 195 side quests, 100 citizens, 65 buildings, 160 research topics, 150 higgledies, 50 skirmishes, 60 tainted monsters, 10 dreamers' mazes, 100 floors of the labyrinth, 4 martial methods, 60 manuals, 6 memory lanes, 4 final bosses, and 100 hours of slogging. Actually, ignore that last one, it's more fun that way. Okay, I think I've learned my lesson about 100%ing JRPGs. Next time I'll do like a Lego game or something. Bye.